Good morning, good morning. I'd like to call the May 27 order, the May 27 meeting of the Coronado Roundtable to order. Please rise for the pledge. Yes, sir. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you. Please be seated. I'm sure you'll recognize the name Jim Kelly. He has a column that appears in the Eagle Journal every week, and he writes up these presentations on a monthly basis. His contributions to the roundtable have been in place for many, many years, and we greatly appreciate your efforts, Jim. Thanks a lot. It's really great to see everyone here. This is a nice crowd. In addition, we have 13 Zoom connections, which means many times we have 2 people or sometimes more watching the programs on Zoom, so we appreciate your presence. And today, during the question and answer period, the speaker will repeat the question so the people watching on Zoom will understand what the question is. Well, basically, the Coronado Roundtable has been meeting in this room since 1983 or 4, and we're growing rapidly in a more technical world of communications. This is the 11th hybrid program, which means we're combining the video recording of this program of a live speaker with a live Zoom program. And within an hour or so after the program concludes, today's program will be available on the library's Facebook or YouTube pages. These technical advances are being made by the Coronado Library, and today we have Selena Bala. Okay, I can't do it. There's a syllable that I just can't hit quite right. And Tara Davies, librarians who are receiving their training from San Jose State, and we appreciate their cooperation today. Thank you. This is a long way from the Coronado Roundtable to a few years ago. I want to make 3 comments to those of you watching on Zoom about using the mute button. Please hit the mute button so your conversations stay private, and turn the camera button off so your personal activities remain private. And third, there's a chat box. So at any time during the program, if the viewers on Zoom have a question, type it in. Okay. You know, we've been locked up for 2 years, and we turned our board loose on scheduling some programs. Usually we schedule 1 or 2 months ahead and have a backlog. But, well, I'm gonna give you a very nice program schedule that goes through October, skipping September. The July 27 speaker will be, the June speaker will be Roberto Alcantar from SDG&E Public Affairs, who will speak on the Net Zero Initiative. What's Net Zero Initiative? The idea is to combine people who have solar systems on their homes, how much they either put in or withdraw from the power grid. Our July speaker will be Brian Barreto and Christina Soldata of Cal American Water. They're going to talk about water conservation measures. You may have noticed the front page of the recent Union Tribune articles about water conservation, the fact that the governor may sooner or later put water restrictions in place. They're going to talk about water conservation. This will not have to do with water reclamation. The next program will be, we had a big surprise yesterday. There's a new special agent for the FBI in San Diego, and Special Agent Moy will address us on the 4th Friday in July. Excuse me. August. I've got too many notes here. August. I was going to make a comment about July. I'll make this quick. July has 5 Fridays. We meet on the 4th Friday. So if you come the last Friday in July, you missed it. Okay. In October, our speaker will be Dr. Maria Elena Jenner, a member of the International Boundary and Water Commission. That's the U.S. and Mexico section. Now, her business card says she resides in El Paso, Texas. There's more to be developed here, but she will be our speaker in October. And today, our speaker is Jill Olen. You've read her introduction in the newspaper, but I'm going to do it again. Jill is an Assistant Federal Security Director for the Transportation Security Administration, that's TSA, in San Diego and Imperial counties. She worked in the Naval Special Warfare Command, that's the SEAL program, and the Navy Region Southwest prior to joining the Department of Homeland Security. In 2018, Jill, with the support of her husband, Marvin Heinz, City Councilman, volunteered as a Navy civilian to go to Afghanistan for almost 2 years as a lawyer to support NATO's Operation Resolute Support to train, advise, and assist Afghan prosecutors and judges on how to develop evidence and files that would withstand the appeals process. Of course, you have to realize that this has to be really developed well to get past the corruption involved. She also developed policy, wrote legislation, and created trackable databases. The now deposed Islamic Republic government on money laundering, gross violations of human rights, and sexual gender-based violence. Jill has held several senior and executive level positions in Homeland Security and terrorism-related fields on the Mayor of San Diego staff, Secretary of the Army, Special Operations in the Low Intensity Conflict, and the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency of a predecessor organization. Now, Jill's not going to tell you this, but there were times when she was in Afghanistan when she was armed and was told as she was being transported from point A to point B to have a round in the chamber. So with that, here's Jill Olen.
Thank you, Kirk. Yeah, around in the chamber. Yeah, that was always an interesting time. I was qualified on a number of weapons, and some of them were bigger than I was. Yeah. So anyway, I'd like to get right to this. Thank you, everybody, for attending. This is a summary about what has happened in Afghanistan since August of last year. What got us into Afghanistan? I think all of us know pretty much what got us there. It was 9/11. We were initially there to kill Osama bin Laden. He was there at the invitation of the ruling government, who was the Taliban. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. The efforts of Resolute Support were part of a larger organization, a larger effort to make sure that Afghanistan was never again used as a haven for terrorism. Okay, let's keep that in mind. That was our goal for going in. At the time that I left in 2020, there were 27 separate terrorist organizations in Afghanistan. Separate organizations that we knew of, that US and NATO intel knew of. Okay, so the whole idea was to make a strong government that provided alternate resources so that harboring terrorism was not the money maker that they needed. And so what got me to Afghanistan, as Kirk mentioned, I volunteered. I went over as Deputy Director of Rule of Law to combat corruption, gross violations of human rights, and gender-based sexual violence. I had the opportunity to help develop that government. And of course, we know that on August 15th, 2021, that government collapsed and primarily fled as the Taliban came in and took over. The investment that we had in Afghanistan from 2002 to 2021 was approximately $90 billion in US security assistance. This doesn't include humanitarian relief from non-governmental organizations or from the NATO. This is just US security assistance. It included our troops, government workers, so the State Department, DEA, resources, equipment, contractors. The women became a stronger political group during those 20 years. They had education, employment, freedom of movement, which keep this in mind again, a budding concept of gender equality, something again that they hadn't seen since the monarchy in the early 70s. The Doha agreements were a unilateral discussion between the insurgents and the US. The Afghan government was not included in these agreements. So they were signed on February 29th, 2020, with the ultimate removal date of all US forces of August 31st, 2021. So we knew in February of 2020 that 18 months later, all US forces were expected to be out of Afghanistan. The Afghans, the Afghan National Defense Security Forces, which included basically the military and the police, they knew, as did most everybody, that without the US and without the contractors, they could not survive. They did not know how to operate the machinery without the support of these folks. They did not know how to repair the equipment, how to keep the helicopters and the jets and everything that was giving them the advantage over the enemy. They didn't know how to keep it running, how to do the planning. They knew they were sitting ducks if they lost the US support. Also, logistics and supply seriously impacted, not only by the lack of adequate supply lines, because as the roads and infrastructure would be built, the Taliban would blow them up, but also by the serious corruption in the government that we were paying $90 billion to fight the insurgency and develop a strong country. So the soldiers and the police saw this coming. Anybody who was involved in it saw it coming. If you didn't see it coming, you can draw your own conclusion. So these guys lost their will to fight. They lost their morale. They knew what was coming. And so that's why, as we lead up to basically the 9 days in August, most of Afghanistan was just handed over. The rest of Afghanistan was just handed over to the Taliban. There was very little fighting because there was no need to fight, because it was just a suicide mission, because they didn't have the support, and they knew they didn't have the support. In the meantime, the warlords, the governors, the rich people were developing private agreements with the Taliban of how do you protect me? How are you going to protect my assets, my private armies? How do we work together? Just completely abandoning the people, the army, the police, everything. It was just totally a personal, what's in it for me. President Ghani and the National Security Advisor Mohib fled the country before the Taliban even came in to Kabul. They had obviously the intel that they were coming. There's a lot of discussion about that, of what does that mean for a leader, a democratically elected leader, to abandon the country. But if you look back at September 1996, President Najib, who didn't abandon the country when the Taliban came in and took over, was hanged off of the turret of a Soviet tank. So that's not a very pleasant way to go either. So no judgment, but just the facts. As the Taliban took over, there were house-to-house searches for anyone remotely involved in anything that had happened in the past 20 years. And that was the soldiers, police, interpreters, rights activists, prosecutors, judges. And house-to-house searches, that wasn't just a census. That was to go get them, torture them, kill them, load them up in pits as a deterrent to anyone else who thought they might try to protect someone they knew that had been working for the US and wasn't going to tell. This is a quick look at how the Taliban swept across Afghanistan in those 9 days. Basically handed over. The only areas right now that we still have that are not under Taliban control, you see this blue area up here, that's in the Panjshir Valley, the Northern Alliance, the Great Massoud, you might remember from the Soviet days, the Mujahideen, and we'll talk about that in a second. So what's going on right now? Well, the Taliban, the de facto government, is they want to be recognized as the legitimate government of the former Islamic Republic. They have renamed Afghanistan the Islamic Emirates, just like the United Arab Emirates. It's a collection of all states together. It's not a republic, it's a collection of states to be run together under the Taliban, under the religious rule. The reason that the legitimacy is so important is because it provides resources, access to trade, infrastructure, as well as reduces potential external support to anti-Taliban factors or factions within Afghanistan. So far, no country has recognized the Taliban as a legitimate government, nor has any country announced plans to make the announcement that they recognize them. There are some that are sort of silent allies, don't take a stand one way or the other, but thus far, no one has actually come out and recognized the Taliban as the legitimate government. Some of the Western demands are the reasons that the legitimacy is being denied. A lot of it is the formation of an inclusive government. Right now, the government is almost completely Taliban, which is male Pashtuns. There are a number of different ethnic sources, tribes that make up Afghanistan, and there are only 1 or 2% of the government, the existing government, that are represented. Women, of course, we'll get to that in just a second. There's not, I think there might be 1 woman on the in the Taliban government. The adherence to human rights, particularly for women and minorities. You read in the paper what the human rights records of the Taliban is. And then, of course, not victimizing the people who were in the government pre-August 2021. And so these things have not been met. The Taliban keeps saying, yes, of course, just give us time. We need time. And we see that weekly in the newspaper. It's only been 8 months, they don't say Rome wasn't built in a day, but that's their theory. When we look back at their history, when they were running Afghanistan from 1996 to 2001, they said the same thing. Yes, we want legitimacy. Yes, we're good people. We just, we're going to have a legitimate government and be proud members of the world community. We're going to include women. We're going to do all of these things. And during those 5 years, they never did a single thing. And hence, only 3 countries recognize them as legitimate. They've been accused of extrajudicial killings. You have to say accused because you can't really get in there to show it. We have organizations on the ground that we still have plenty of intel there. They're not accusations, they are facts. They are killing people extrajudicially, meaning without trial. They're pulling them out of the house and beating them to death, shooting them, torturing them, or just disappearing, so we don't know what happened to them. Some of those people are people that my group is trying to help extract, that were people that helped the US government. And we track those folks, and then we lose them. We don't know what happened to them. So we know that this is going on. And also other reasons for not being recognized as legitimate is because they didn't follow a constitutional process. They went in, they took over, imposed their rule. And so they don't have any popular legitimacy from the Afghan people. The progress that the Afghans had in 2002 to 2021, a lot of it focused on what the women were allowed to do, because they were coming out of an era where women were invisible, intentionally made invisible by the Taliban. And one thing to remember, the Taliban is really, or the Afghanistan is really run by a number of tribes, and they each have their different characteristics. And some of the tribes most of the tribes are very rural, and some of them are very conservative. So the idea of the burqas and the women not working and only being good for having sons is their culture, and they don't want to change that. So please don't think that all of Afghanistan was free and they were doing that. Now this big dark cloud has come over and suppressed all of Afghanistan. There's a large part of Afghanistan that already lived that way, and I won't say liked it, but that's what they did. Okay, it's primarily in the large cities. There are 5 large cities. It's primarily there that women experienced these rights. They had representatives from the rural places that came into the Loya Jirga and tried to bring some of that freedom back. Some of it was met with mixed results, as you might imagine. But anyway, some of the progress that they had made during that time is that 27% of the members of parliament were women. In the US, 26.5 of the of Congress is women. So here, just, before we start throwing rocks, 20% were government workers, access to college and university. That's a low number, but that's because they didn't have really anyone in the pipeline going to the high school to get into there, and it was building up. And that's one of the things that we've lost. 22% were working. Over 1,000 had owned businesses, which before was haram, was forbidden. They had salons, restaurants, bookshops, all kinds of things. They have flower shops. They had rights and privileges. They were allowed to move around. They had freedom of movement. They didn't need escorts. They were like regular women. Other improvements, other progress we saw, there was an increase in life expectancy. Maternal mortality was halved. It was cut in half during that period. They got all kinds of health clinics and infrastructure and highways. Of course, the highways that I mentioned earlier, every time we'd build a portion of the highway, the Taliban would come and blow it up, which was incredibly frustrating. But that was the game. That was the cat and mouse game. But access to the outside world, so the internet, open media, cell phones. Okay, so here we go. since August 15th. This is the Sunday that they came into Kabul. So since then, no secondary or post-secondary education, even though I'm sure all of you remember, they said, yes, we're going to do that. And the girls came to start school on March 21st, so excited. And they turned them all away. Said, well, we're not quite ready yet. We haven't quite figured it out. No, they can't work outside. And I said, no outside work. They can't work inside the home either. They can't have an Etsy job. They can't have work from home like we do. I mean, it's not you bake your bread and you watch your kids. Maybe in the health sector, maybe in education. Those are the only opportunities for women right now. They are required now to wear the burqas, the complete head to toe. Blue is the color of the Taliban, the blue burqas. They are required to have a male relative escort every time they leave the home, even though leaving the home is highly discouraged. So it's not like, hey, brother Bob, let's go to the park. It's like you better have a really good reason for leaving the home. Okay. And if the female is not following these rules, then the male is the one who gets picked up by the police and beaten and thrown in jail. Okay. Can't appear on television except for very limited newscasting. And now they have to wear a face covering as well. That's new just for the last, maybe about the last week. No music, no sports, and the men have to wear beards. And you say, well, how's that an impact on women? Trust me, guys, it's an impact on women. So the current status, where are we now? It's also a cessation of aid. So that was 45% of the GOP. So now people are suffering from the pandemic, severe food shortage. The people are truly, truly suffering. Some of them are selling their minor daughters, 6, 7, 8 years old, in order to buy food. Oh, who are selling their daughters? Who are they selling them to? Use your imagination. Well, I'm sure they're just taking care of them like their own daughters, right? Use your imagination. No, they're not. They're child brides. Major disruption of basic services. Electric pylons are regularly being destroyed, not by the Taliban, but by the Taliban's enemies, primarily ISIS-K. So it's not just the Taliban who's wreaking havoc in Afghanistan. They've got a loss of overseas assets, and Taliban is also controlling the government media. So what's the impact on women right now? Well, they were used to the rights that we just talked about. Right now, many are in hiding. They fear for their lives. Some of them have disappeared. They can't earn money to support their families. Some don't have male relatives. So what do you do if you can't work? You don't even have a male relative to take you out to beg for food. What do you do? They've got forced marriages. That's different than selling your baby daughter to some creepy guy. These are forced marriages, going in and saying, oh, your 13-year-old looks just perfectly yummy for my Taliban soldier. We need to keep them happy. And I've got, unfortunately, personal experience in seeing those transactions. Okay, love this quote, okay? This is a quote from the Minister of Interior. We keep naughty women at home, okay? That's why these are imposed. Under the Republic, the Ministry of Women, we had a Ministry of Women that was developing all kinds of opportunities for women. It was immediately replaced with the Ministry for the Promotion of Virtue and the Prevention of Vice. And that is the moral police. Those are the ones that go around with the canes, beating people that are showing too much skin, not following the rules, lagging around too long. They also detain the women, they also are the ones that are responsible for women disappearing. And the women's roles have been defined by the Taliban as they will be interpreted under Islamic law and national, cultural, and traditional principles. And that is based on the interpretation of very hard-lined Taliban leadership. This guy, Haqqani, it's my favorite guy, okay? He's now the Minister of Interior. When I was in Afghanistan, I worked for the Minister of Interior with Saleh. We'll see him in just a second. This is the first picture of this man ever. First picture surfaced about 10 days ago in an interview with Christiana Amanpour. First picture of this man, okay? He's the Minister of Interior. That means he is doing all the virtue and vice. He runs the Afghan National Police, all of the law enforcement, border enforcement, all of those things in Afghanistan. Oh, did I mention he's a co-deputy of the Taliban? He is a specially designated global terrorist, according to the United States State Department. Yeah, he's also wanted by the FBI for blowing up a hotel in 2008 in Kabul that killed American citizens. Oh, yeah, he's also the son of the man who founded the Haqqani network that was designated as a terrorist group in 2012. Okay, so when people say, oh, are you a little bit emotional thinking that this new regime is run by terrorists? No, I don't think I am. I think this is pretty factual. I think it's pretty factual. You know, yeah, am I upset about what happened? Yes, I am. And if you're not, you might want to check your pulse. But this is who we've got running Afghanistan. Okay. Few of the other terrorist groups that are in there, ISIS-K, they are the mortal rival of Taliban, have been for years. And so they're not cutting them any slack. They were fighting them while I was there. So you always had to be careful not to get in the crossfire of the Taliban, who were trying to shell us on our bases. And ISIS-K was trying to shell them because they would get close to, Taliban would get close to our bases. So the ISIS-K rockets would hit them, but maybe accidentally go into our bases. It was just a mess. But ISIS-K, get this, they don't think the Taliban is tough enough. They think they're softies, they're religious softies. They're not fundamentalist enough. They want a global caliphate, not just an emirate. So these guys are not our friend either, okay? And they're gaining strength as the Taliban is being stretched so thin because the people are expecting them to govern now and protect them. And the Taliban don't really have a lot of experience in governing. Al-Qaeda, they're still there. Part of the Doha agreement was that Taliban would renounce Al-Qaeda. They have not done that. And then the Pakistan Taliban, they have moved into Afghanistan. They're launching terrorist operations into Pakistan. And now the new leadership is saying, hey, that's uncool. So they're rocketing and bombing Afghanistan. And so it's just a big cycle, and they're expelling the refugees that were seeking haven from the Taliban. But now you've got the Pakistan Taliban. It's all very, very complicated, and none of it is good. And this is what has happened since August. There is anti-Taliban activity. We talked about it up in the Panjshir Valley, the National Resistance Front. This is a regrouping, basically, of the Northern Alliance. You might remember the great Massoud, the Lion of the North. He was assassinated 2 days before 9/11. They're still active. They were great fighters against the Soviets and against the rest of the Mujahideen. They have made a little bit of progress up in the Taliban. They up in the north of Panjshir Valley. They're joined by some very high-ranking people from the Republic government, including the first vice president, Saleh. That's the man who I worked for, who was the Minister of Interior. He's declared himself under the Afghan constitution as the president of Afghanistan. They're trying to establish a parallel government, basically. But their issues are there's no foreign aid coming to them. And also they are supported with private armies and drug money from the old warlords. And they're the ones that want to be president. And you might remember our old friend Dostum from the Mujahideen days in the Northern Alliance. He's quite a guy, and he wants to be president. So anyway, what can we do? Where are we? This is what's going on in Afghanistan right now. What can we do? Please don't let it be forgotten. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world, a lot of very important stuff. No way minimizing anything that's going on. It's all pretty horrible, but don't let Afghanistan be forgotten. It was a chaotic withdrawal. We had 18 months notice. Don't let those responsible get off the hook. Keep holding them responsible. There are a lot of people who risk their lives for the US. We made promises to them. Help us get them out, please. It's what we're doing. Keep it in the news, keep it in your discussions. And if you find reputable organizations that you want to volunteer to or donate to, please do that. And with that, I will wrap it up. Thank you.